Hello there. Welcome to Blitz Transmissions. I'm Tommy, and this is episode 23 of the Blitzcast. Before we get into the content of this podcast episode, make sure to check out all the links in the description below, as always. If you are an ARC Trooper in my Patreon, you would have seen this podcast episode a little early. If you'd like access to early content, as well as monthly giveaways and more awesome benefits, make sure to check out the link there. Also, if you're more into the action figure review, product review side of things here on YouTube, you can check out my YouTube channel membership, Rancor Battalion. That link is in the description below as well, along with all my social media. That includes my Instagram page, my separate Instagram page, Blitz Bounties, for all of my, collection updates and pickups, things of that nature. And you can also check out my X page, where I post just announcements, same kind of stuff I post on Instagram. And then you can check out my Discord, as well as some of the platforms that you can listen to the Blitzcast on, like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and more. So, everyone, it's another week, and it's another week of me being alone here. It's been an interesting week. I just switched over from third shift to second shift for the month, and when I'm working second shift, Jen and I have opposite schedules. She works your usual, 9 to 5 type job, and when I'm on second shift, we don't even see each other most days when I'm working. So it gets difficult to, schedule times to podcast and do anything together, really, let alone podcast. So you're going to probably, this month, you're going to see a lot of me by myself. And that's okay, because there's not a whole lot to talk about when it comes to Star Wars. There's no Star Wars news right now. It's kind of funny, January to March is this weird drought in Star Wars news and rumors, action figure news and rumors. There's not a whole lot to talk about. And so it is fun, though, because I kind of get to pick a topic that I want to ramble about for 20 minutes to an hour, and I can just go with it. I can just go any direction I want. I don't have to really, focus on, okay, I got to cover the news, I got to cover, everything else. There's not a whole lot on the channel as far as, new stuff. I posted some reviews, some topical videos this past week. Just whatever I feel like posting. You know the vibes here on this channel. So what I'm going to be doing today is we're going to be talking about the prequels and what it's like having lived through and seen the perception of the prequels change with it being the Star Wars that I grew up with. So I've said several times on the channel that I was more of a Clone Wars kid than I was a prequels kid. But of course, before the Clone Wars, the 2008 series was a thing, I had the Prequel Trilogy. Some of my earliest memories as a kid, I remember being in the living room in my parents' house. I don't know why this is such a photographic memory. My dad was folding laundry, and an ad came up for Revenge of the Sith being in theaters, and I asked my dad if we could go see the Star Wars movie, and he said no because it was rated PG-13, and he didn't feel comfortable taking me when I was literally 4 or 5 years old. Understandable. I'll forgive him for that one, to go see Revenge of the Sith in theaters. And I remember when he got it on DVD, he showed me parts. I think he skipped over the part where Anakin is getting assembled as Darth Vader. Again, I was extremely young. I can understand that decision there. But yeah, some of my earliest memories obviously were the prequels, and so I had a huge affinity for just different, glup shitto Jedi. I was reading encyclopedias, comic books for this era between the Phantom Menace and, Revenge of the Sith. The 2003 Clone Wars micro-series was out at the time, so I was, playing with those characters a lot too. I had a Dirge action figure that I loved to death, and my particular things that I enjoyed most were Obi-Wan Kenobi, the Clone Troopers, Republic gunships. I really liked super battle droids, just having big battles with my toys as a kid and, building out scenarios. However, obviously, as a kid, you're kind of blind to, especially with how, the internet is much more central to our lives nowadays than it was back in 2004, 2005. I had no idea back in the day that the prequels were received so negatively by the general audiences. And I find it very interesting how that has changed over the years. A few months ago now, I did a video on the channel here, and it was just me kind of talking about, my thoughts on the cyclical generational hate of new Star Wars media, and I kind of predicted in that video how I think that 15, 20 years from now, the sequel trilogy will start to be regarded a little bit more positively than the prequel trilogy, like the prequel trilogy, where, over time, the generation of the kids that grew up with those movies will gain more of a voice in the fandom and have a little bit more of appreciation for the media they grew up with, because you have those rose-tinted glasses when you're watching the stuff you grew up with as a kid. With that said, kind of touching on the rose-tinted glasses subject, I think that there are prequel fans that are a little too over the top when it comes to their enjoyment of the prequels. I kind of make fun of, and I used to make fun of all the time, the whole Revenge of the Sith is an underrated masterpiece. I remember back in 2020, 2021, that was a thing that everybody said on the internet. You just had everyone that was in their mid to late 20s being like, Revenge of the Sith is an underrated masterpiece. It's an underrated masterpiece. And it was kind of funny to look at, because it's a fantastic Star Wars movie. I think most Star Wars fans will agree that it's not only the best of the prequel trilogy, but one of the best Star Wars movies, period, to this day. So, I don't know. It just, statements like that I've always thought were kind of funny. But I think that there's a little bit of a weird place that prequel trilogy fans find themselves in. And again, I made a video about this months ago, but I don't know. I kind of wanted to just elaborate on it more on this podcast this week. It's been something that's been festering in my mind, and I kind of just wanted to talk about it. Growing up, you had the prequels, we had toys, we had movies, we had comics, we had books, we had shows. You grow up and you have that nostalgia for that era. You have that nostalgia, which we talked a little bit about last week on the podcast, about, the nostalgia of Star Wars fans, and why we're chasing that so hard. And so I think that we're in an era right now. Right now in 2025 is the height of prequel, specifically Revenge of the Sith nostalgia. We're approaching that same level of nostalgia for the Clone Wars series, the 2008 version. And I think that it's interesting how prequel fans have, the attitude they tend to have toward the sequel trilogy and the newer Star Wars content. Because I think my issue is this. Prequel Star Wars fans, people who champion the prequel trilogy, it's not as bad as people say, it's not as cringe as people think it is. They are the first ones a lot of times in the online space. They're so quick to just take a piss, for lack of a better phrase, on the sequel trilogy, on the Disney Plus era Star Wars stuff, just anything and everything that Disney just dumps out. They are so quick to just write it off and just dump on it, man. It's so kind of jarring to see. It's almost like, do you not see the hypocrisy in what you're doing? Because a lot, and I can't, I'm not talking about the fandom as a whole. I'm not trying to dump on the Star Wars fandom as a I'm a part of the Star Wars fandom, but I think that there's a certain level of hypocrisy that comes with seeing a lot of people online not only just take a dump on the media, but then also take a dump on the people that like that media. Who cares, bro? You like Attack of the Clones. You like The Phantom Menace, which are, highly regarded as not the best Star Wars movies by most Star Wars fans. I'm a huge prequel fan, and I have a lot of love for all the prequel trilogy films. But I remember as a kid, even I didn't care about parts of Attack of the Clones, like the whole Anakin Padme thing. When I was a kid, I didn't care about that. I thought it was cringe even then. And same with the Phantom Menace. I'm going to be honest. When I was a kid, there were a lot of parts of the Phantom Menace that I thought were very, very boring. And as I've gotten older, obviously part of it's nostalgia, but I've gained an appreciation for like all the politics, a lot of the sitting and talking scenes. When you're a kid, you don't really care as much about that stuff. And I don't know. I just find it interesting that there's a lot of valid criticism with the prequel trilogy, and I think that prequel trilogy fans, especially my age, tend to throw that out the window when they're just looking to just dump on new Star Wars media. Something that I really liked about the prequel trilogy was that the Clone Wars show, both the 2003 and the 2008, sought to kind of fill in some gaps and fill in plot holes and kind of help like soften out characters that were not well received by the general audiences. And it worked very, very well. I think George Lucas and Dave Filoni and the creative team behind the 2008 Clone Wars show and Genndy Tartakovsky with the 2003 show, I think both teams did a fantastic job of really fleshing out characters. I mean, showing Anakin's fall to the dark side was extremely jarring. If you only have the prequel trilogy, it is extremely abrupt. You have this 18-year-old Anakin in Attack of the Clones who's extremely arrogant and whiny and just this impulsive kid, because he is a kid at the end of the day. And he's almost like unbearable at times in that movie because he's acting his age. He's acting like a kid who doesn't know anything about the world other than the Jedi Code. And he's, grappling with things like the loss of his mother, and he's grappling with things like he has a crush on a girl. He doesn't know what to do with that because of how he was raised. And then you jump 3 years to the end of the Clone War to Anakin's now like in his early 20s. He's about to be a father. And he just makes a lot of decisions that you're like, wow, that was like really abrupt. Like that happened so quick. He really fell to the dark side quickly. And you can give me the whole like, oh, well, if you read the Revenge of the Sith novel, oh, well, if you read these comic books, oh, well, if you, this is kind of what I'm getting to is there's that's a criticism I see prequel fans give sequel fans about the sequel trilogy. It's like, oh, well, have you read Resistance Reborn? This was a book that came out in between the release of The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker. It was a chapter. I think I have it below me here. Let me see if I can grab it. Yeah, it's right on the end here. But this book here, I remember I read this back in 2019 by Rebecca Roanhorse. Star Wars Resistance Reborn. It's a pretty good book. Like if you're, if you just want a nice little easily digestible Star Wars read, I actually would recommend reading this. I remember I really enjoyed it, and I finished it literally like an hour before I left to go watch the Rise of Skywalker for the first time. And it was fun. It's like I don't really read Star Wars novels anymore. I really should, kind of jump back in the saddle here. But, at the time, that was fun. That was fun to read going into it. But there were things that happened in that book that, directly coincided with little nods and things that happened in The Rise of Skywalker. And, I would see people online be like, oh, well, if you read, people would say, like, oh, this didn't make sense. Where did this come from in the movie? And then people would say, oh, well, if you watched, if you read this book, you would know. And people, respond, I shouldn't have to read a book. I shouldn't have to do homework to go watch a movie. But it was like the same exact way with the prequels, though. That's kind of like, come on, man. You grew up with the same type of thing because, people will say, let me gather my thoughts here. People will say, oh, well, the Anakin fall to the dark side was very abrupt. And then you'll get hit with, well, if you read this book, if you watched these episodes of the Clone Wars, if you did this, if you did that, if you did these 19 things, well, then it makes more sense. Nothing's wrong with that. I prefer that. I want more content. I've heard the phrase a lot. The best way to fix Star Wars is by making more Star Wars. And I feel like that rings true. For a lot of times there's plot holes or, the issues with characters and how they're written and things like that. Just make more Star Wars and you can kind of flesh things out that way. So I don't know. That's, I think, for me, the hypocrisy of it is there's this, like, as prequel fans, whether we were old enough to remember it or not, we grew up with loving a trilogy that wasn't highly regarded by a lot of fans who grew up with the original trilogy. And now, a lot of us are doing the same thing to the younger generation. It's like this passing of the torch of just negativity. Like, I hate it. But yeah, it's the Clone Wars did a great show, or they did a great job as a show of giving Star Wars fans things that they wanted to see. Like, I want to see Anakin's slow fall to the dark side over the course of 3 years. Boom. Here's 7 seasons of the Clone Wars where you can watch this happen, and because it's so much more gradual, by the time you get to Revenge of the Sith, everything makes total sense. You see that Anakin and Padme were already having relationship issues all throughout the Clone Wars. You see that Anakin was struggling with the dark side in plenty of ways throughout the course of the show. You see the influence of Palpatine on Anakin throughout the show, and how Palpatine kind of uses the Council against Anakin. It's great. It's fantastic storytelling, and you get awesome new characters in there as well, like Captain Rex and Ahsoka Tano. 2 of the best characters in Star Wars, period, out of any Star Wars. They're up there with like the top 10 characters, I'd argue. And I don't understand why there's this negativity towards, shows like, here's a good one, The Bad Batch. The Bad Batch and The Mandalorian, and lots of shows in this new Disney Plus era of Star Wars that we're in still right now. I feel like we're kind of at the tail end of that era because of, Disney kind of pulling back and Lucasfilm pulling back on the number of shows and, specials and stuff they're releasing, which I agree with that decision. I think we need to really I'd rather have one project a year that's a banger rather than have like a few shows a year where one might be a mixed bag for me, one might be one that I really enjoy. I would rather just wait longer and have more consistent enjoyment in what comes out. That said, I think with The Bad Batch and The Mandalorian, for example, I love that they're slowly connecting the end of the original trilogy to the beginning of The Force Awakens. I can feel the pull. We're bridging that 30-year gap. We're starting to see the groundwork being laid as to how we get to what happens in The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, even The Rise of Skywalker. We're seeing this stuff, and I don't understand why people have a problem with it. It's garbage, it's slop, it's this, that. I don't understand why that's an issue, because it wasn't an issue when the Clone Wars was coming out, and again, we come back to the rose-tinted glasses. As much as we want to say that we love the Clone Wars, I revere the Clone Wars. It's my favorite Star Wars series, live action or animated, and it forever will be. But a lot of that comes from nostalgia, and there's a lot of stuff that if I watched it today, and if a lot of Clone Wars episodes came out today, a lot of these people that revere the Clone Wars so much would hate some of this stuff, like the Captain Gregor arc with the D Squad with Colonel Meeber Gascon. That would not be received well today. Or like the C-3PO and R2-D2 like acid trip adventure episodes. Like, those are like, I love them. I love stuff like that because I love silly, goofy Star Wars. And I always have. But, I know that these general audiences would hate on those episodes so hard. It's a real head scratcher, I guess, for lack of better phrasing, to see how these people act towards like new stuff. Like The Bad Batch is a great story. It's about family, but you also have some great connections to things that happen all the way to Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. And you have, same with The Mandalorian. They're connecting the dots, and they're doing it subtly. They're not just giving you one lore dump where the mustache-twirling villain gives his monologue on what he's doing. They've even gone as far as to kind of fake you out, where you think right from the get-go in The Mandalorian that Moff Gideon is the one that's working on the Force cloning for Palpatine, whereas we find out, I'm sure that was the intent, was for it to be for Palpatine, but Moff Gideon, being a selfish warlord that he ends up trying to use that power for himself once he cracks the code. And that's cool. I like that it's kind of drawing things out a little bit. So now you have someone like Grand Admiral Thrawn, who's back in the galaxy, who, through the novels, through prior content, is very loyal to Palpatine, is going to probably find what's left of this technology from whether it's the Shadow Council, which was established in The Mandalorian Season 3, or some other means. He's probably going to pick up the pieces and finish the job. And it's going to bring us to, where we get to with Palpatine and the Rise of Skywalker. I have no problem with that. When you watch just the movies, there's plenty of stuff. Definitely the original trilogy is the most cohesive of the three trilogies. I don't think that that's very arguable. I think that, partially because the time gaps are much shorter. There's not a lot of huge time gaps here, and there's also not the issue of multiple directors and writers kind of throwing each other's ideas out and then changing things movie to movie. So the original trilogy is the most cohesive of the three, so there's no need for too much more content to include there. But yeah, I don't know, it's just one of those things that I find strange. We've grown up with the prequel trilogy, and you would think that growing up with the Star Wars that gets made fun of when you were growing up would make you be a little more accepting of the people that are enjoying the new stuff that you might not like. And that's my other point I want to make here. It's okay to not like something Star Wars. If you hate something Star Wars, that's your opinion and you're entitled to it. There's nothing wrong with hating something new that came out. There's plenty of stuff that I'm not a fan of, plenty of decisions that were made in the newer Star Wars media that I don't care for, that I don't, care about. I'll never watch it again. Like Tales of the Empire would be a good one for me, or, a lot of stuff that happened in The Acolyte, just... it's not for me. It's not for me, and but I'm not going to watch it. And the other part of that, though, is I'm not going to go out of my way to incessantly bring up, The Acolyte and Tales of the Empire. I just don't like the shows. Whatever. Like, it is what it is. I'm going to go back and enjoy the things that I do enjoy. Like The Mandalorian, like the Clone Wars, like the prequel trilogy. If there's something you enjoy about the franchise, latch onto that. That's your thing. That's your niche. I don't understand why it needs to be such a big deal that you don't like something. Oh, boo-hoo! The world doesn't revolve around you, bro. Like I don't understand getting so upset about a fantasy franchise. People get so up in arms. People get so mad. It's like, dude, you have way too much time on your hands. I wish I had the time in my day to be so upset about something that it just affects me that much every day when it's a fantasy fictional universe and there were decisions made in a show that I didn't like, and it consumes your whole existence, becomes your whole personality. You end up becoming one of those Tips Fedora Redditors that's just on the message board 25/8. All you're doing is just messaging away, just reiterating the same 5 sentences over and over and over again. Yeah, it's just wild. But I found myself going on this tangent here. But I think that what I'm trying to get at is, as a prequel fan, I think that it's important to be mindful of how we act towards the younger generation. And I shouldn't even have to say this because it should just be obvious. But we should be a little mindful of how we treat the next generation, because just because we don't like something doesn't mean that the next generation isn't going to like it either. But I also think the internet has played a huge role in that. There are literally people on YouTube that are making tens of thousands of dollars a year, if not like 6 figures or more in some rare cases, just off of like grifting, just off of like making hateful content, spewing hatred online. And in a lot of cases, like these people don't even actually hate Star Wars as much as they make it seem like they do. It's just what sells. It's what makes them money. When you're making that money off of your content, yeah, of course you're going to make your focus is going to be, your priority is going to be making the content that makes you money. It's really that simple. And I don't understand why people miss the boat there. It's like, yeah, people are selfish and they're greedy. And when they're making money off of content, literally enough to make a livable wage, of course you're going to continue to make the content that performs better, because it's your job now. You know, it's not just a little side hobby. Like my YouTube channel is my little side hobby. You know, that's what I do. It's my passion project that I do on the side. I don't ever want it to be my main source of income, because it's going to change the way that I perceive the fandom and my content. It's going to influence the way that I do things on the channel, and I don't want it to be that way. And that I don't want to lose that passion for what I love to talk about and do so much. Star Wars is a huge part of my life, always has been, and I find it very, very saddening to see that, you know, it's become such a negative space for a lot of people. But then again, I think it only affects you as much as you let it. Like I'm on the internet way less as opposed to how it seems. I know it may seem like I'm on the internet a lot, but really, you know, unless I'm posting my own videos or like I'm watching like my friends' videos that they make, I don't really do half as much scrolling or exploring on the internet as I used to, because I found myself just like being consumed by that negativity. You see like posts that you like disagree with at heart, and they rope you in. Like it's clearly a troll post that person made. They're just trying to like farm engagement on their post about like, oh, I hate this person, blah, blah, blah. It like compels you to like want to reply. And once you like realize that that's the whole point of their post, is to get you to reply because they're going to make money off of all the interactions, you kind of like want to take a step back. I do so much less scrolling. Like I haven't had TikTok in months. I don't like that. I will never have a TikTok for Blitz transmissions. It's just how it is. And I don't want to. I used to be such a doom scroller on TikTok. Dude, it wasn't even funny. It was so bad. It was so bad. I was such a doom scroller. I would literally sometimes I'd spend hours just rotting away, just doom scrolling, watching nothing videos. And a lot of it was like, again, nerd culture. It's like you watch a Star Wars video and it's just people don't even like, you're not even, it's like word salad. Like it's to the point where people just aren't even saying anything of substance. They're not even making a point. They're just saying like words and phrases that are going to get one side riled up and get one side like all cheering for them. I won't name names, but there's this one podcast that like, I don't understand. I don't understand how these platforms get so big. Like how these people get so big. I don't know if it's like one day you'll just see this channel and they just explode off of like inflammatory content. And then all of a sudden they have all these like sponsorships and brand deals and all this stuff. I'm like, oh my God, how did that just happen? But that's the nature of social media. Everything's so fast, especially with TikTok. TikTok has ruined people's attention spans. It hurt mine. I'm still like recovering from the attention span deficit created by TikTok. I have to remind myself to pay attention to things over like a longer period of time, because TikTok just trained my brain to be like, oh, if it's been more than like 10 seconds, tune out, watch the next thing, scroll away. And that's how they get you. It's addicting. But enough about the psychology of social media. If you want to hear more about that, my lovely fiance Jen did an episode on that topic on her podcast, The Real Normal. I think that was 2 weeks ago now. She posted that episode. Definitely check it out. It was very, very good. Obviously, I'm biased, but her podcast is very good. Anyway, there's this one particular podcast that I saw. And it's kind of crazy. Like they weren't even saying anything. I remember this too because I sent it to some of my friends. They're just like, if you're a real Star Wars fan, then you know that the only real Star Wars is the Star Wars that George Lucas made, and nothing else matters, and nothing else is really canon, and they're just destroying George Lucas's legacy, and Disney is just destroying George Lucas's legacy, and just remember, guys, that they're just like repeating the same like 2 or 3 things over and over and over again, and it's a very intelligent way to go about, like, you know, oh, I'm going to become an influencer. You just say inflammatory things, and you say them in a way that, such a matter-of-fact way, that it like compels people to either comment that they agree with you or comment that they hate you because they disagree with you. And I found myself down quite the rabbit hole this episode. This episode was supposed to be about, you know, growing up as a prequel fan. Here I am now. I'm talking about social media. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I could continue to just go on and on and on with this topic, and maybe I will. Yeah, I don't know, guys. I feel like it's just the internet has caused such a negative space, not just for Star Wars, but for every fandom. I've noticed every fandom is just so unbearable on the online space, and that's why I'm happy that I've kind of catered this very nice, positive, you know, realistic little corner of the Star Wars fandom and of the internet. I'm really enjoying it. And I'm also enjoying the interactions I get to have with people, the genuine storytelling, the back and forths of anecdotes that I get to have with people in my comments a lot. It tells me that there are still real people who think real things out there, and that it's kind of, because that's the other thing is I talk to people all the time about just, you know, pop culture in general. And there are so many people that are just, you can just tell they're just vomiting at you. Like just everything that they just heard from some YouTuber or some TikToker. Like, oh, did you hear blah, 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 and here's why it sucks, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, you just said like 90,000 things in 30 seconds. And there's so much that I want to unpack there. But the other part is they're not trying to have a conversation. And I think that's the other part of, you know, the hypocrisy, back to the original point here, after I went on this huge social media tangent. There's hypocrisy in the generational hate of Star Wars, this like cyclical hate, in the social media aspect too. You know, I like this glup shitto from this movie, but you and your glup shitto are stupid because that's from this movie that I don't like as much. Who cares, dude? Who cares? We all like different things, and that's why Star Wars is great, because it's so vast now that everyone can kind of like hyperfixate on whatever they want. If you're a Clone Wars kid, you stick with Clone Wars, and that's your niche. If you are a Bad Batch person, I know there's Bad Batch people out there that love the Bad Batch and love the characters. That there's a corner of the internet for that. And I enjoy, you know, seeing people's different perspectives and seeing, you know, people's different wants from the franchise. Yeah, I don't know, guys. I'm in this weird position right now where I'm like watching this like mob mentality. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but it feels right. There's a mob mentality behind like hating on new Star Wars media, and it's now we're at the point where we're hating on Star Wars media before it even drops, and that's a dangerous thing because it's going to hurt the franchise as a whole. I think that there's a difference between like having Star Wars content, you know, like sharing your opinion on I really didn't like this, and once you start just hating on everything before it even comes out, you're no longer like demanding, you know, hey, I want to see this instead. Now you're like treading into the territory of like, you know, well, you're just telling the company that you don't want to see anything because everything that they make you hate, and you say it sucks. I mean, we're seeing it's to the point now that, you know, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, when The Mandalorian started in 2019, Dave Filoni was on this pedestal and was untouchable and was like, he's the coolest guy ever. I think Dave Filoni's the coolest guy ever. He's George Lucas's Padawan. But, like, he was on this pedestal, this untouchable, like, pedestal for, like, being a lore keeper and being knowledgeable in the franchise, to now, I see people, like, take a dump on Dave Filoni as a creative and as a writer way more than I've ever seen, ever. I don't know when we all decided we were turning on Dave Filoni because maybe we didn't like some of the decisions that he made in the Ahsoka series. Dude, I think this is the root of the hypocrisy here, is people had an image of what they wanted the prequel trilogy to be. Then the prequel trilogy came out, and George's vision was different from what fans had made in their heads. And fans attacked George Lucas. They attacked the actors. It was terrible. Hearing about, like, stories like Ahmed Best, Jake Lloyd, that still affects Jake Lloyd to this day. Very, very sad. And then we saw the exact same thing happen with the sequel trilogy. Creatives made their decisions. Fans had for decades images in their heads of how the story was going to play out after the events of the original trilogy. I don't like all the decisions that were made in the sequel trilogy. I don't care for a lot of the characters and a lot of the decisions. But I would never go as far as to, like, start attacking the creatives as people and attacking the actors. And it's just such a scapegoat. It's like, I don't think anyone's intention ever was to destroy the Star Wars franchise. And I think that's what gets me. That's what makes me, like, roll my eyes the most is there's this idea that the people making the content have this malicious intent to destroy it so that they can get their way and it can be done how they want it to be done, and everyone else can kick rocks when it's just not. Like, I don't know why it comes back to, like, people are way too dramatic about something that should not matter that much. I get Star Wars is a very sacred thing for a lot of people. It is for me as well. But it at the same time, it's not that real, bro. Like, it really isn't. And it's very, honestly, it's kind of concerning to see how upset and how fired up people get about Star Wars. Absolutely be passionate about it. But sometimes you got to know when to just check yourself and be like, maybe I need to take a step back. Maybe I need to take a chill pill here, because I think that some people take it way too seriously and they take stuff to heart and they get angry, and it's wild to see some people how violent they get with their words and with their actions over it. It's even like with the Star Wars collecting community. There's another page. Again, I won't say names. But there's a page on Instagram for Star Wars action figures. If you're one of my Star Wars action figure people, you know who I'm talking about. This dude is such a miserable hater of the Black Series line, and every post he makes is negative, and he's just dumping on Hasbro, and he's dumping on the action figures, and it just every single day this guy posts something about it. And I don't understand how your life can be so miserable, or how you can have that much time in your day to fixate so much on this kind of thing. It's wild, but I don't know. I guess my final point here, kind of this again. I knew this episode was going to be ranty, but it's just been really a massive rabbit hole. just jumping down every hole I find. I think with the prequel trilogy, I think that this generation has the most insight on both sides of the coin. We have the Star Wars that we feel like hasn't been treated right, and we have the Star Wars that, isn't being respected by later Star Wars, but at the same time, we have the fandom that got dumped on by older people who didn't like what we like. Different strokes for different folks. I think that we have the ability as the prequel trilogy generation to provide the most insight on the fandom and really help the fandom heal. Especially 2024 was such a tumultuous, that's your word of the day, tumultuous time for the Star Wars fandom with the release of The Acolyte. I never want to go back there. I never want to go back to when that show was coming out because it was just miserable. Just the hate campaign against that show was so miserable. Like I said, I really didn't like the show a lot, but there's some things that I did enjoy, and I enjoyed it enough to buy action figures from it. So I'll give it that. But it's just, I just don't, it just consumed all Star Wars conversation to the point where, like, to this day, actually, here's a great analogy. My hope is that these newer Star Wars generations will kind of have the same effect that the prequel generation did. Because when I was a kid, it was pretty commonplace to for people talking comic shop talk. When you went to the action figure store, your local comic shop, they're talking shit, I guess is the best way to put it without thinking of a better way to phrase it. They're talking shit about how they feel about the new movies and how it's garbage and the characters suck and whatever they doing with the writing and the pacing and the blah, blah, blah. But it's funny how it changes over time. When I was at GalaxyCon Columbus back in December to meet Sam Witwer, I went with Jen and Hybrid Toy Reviews. Jen and I were standing in line for some Chick-fil-A at the convention. And these two dudes behind us were talking about the guests, and there was a woman. So there was a woman behind us who her husband was with the 501st Legion, and she mentioned something. She was talking to these two total neckbeards behind her that are like in their 50s. And I never will forget this because this was crazy. She was talking about her husband being in the 501st because these guys had Star Wars shirts on. They said, I forget who they were there to meet. But I turned around, 501st. So she showed me pictures, and she showed me a picture. Their 501st garrison got pictures with Hayden Christensen because Hayden Christensen was also a guest at GalaxyCon Columbus that weekend. And we were talking about how Hayden Christensen's autograph was like $200 or $300. And the two guys, this was totally, they weren't talking to us. They were just having their own conversation. But I was, hearing them. They heard us talking about that, and then one of them looked at the other and said, I would never pay that much for an autograph. And then the other one looked at him and said, yeah, especially for one of the people that ruined Star Wars. And then they just started going on and on about how much Hayden Christensen sucks and how much a prequel sucks. And I was looking, and I looked at Jen, and I was like, dude, these guys are like stuck in 20 years ago. Like these guys are stuck in the 2000s. It's not that real. If you're still talking about it, they were mad. Like these dudes were angry about just the existence of Hayden Christensen. And it kind of hit me like, if you're that mad, like 20 years later, like it was such a jarring statement to me because you just don't hear people say that nowadays very often. And just the passion and rage behind what they were saying. I was like, that's like, bro, get over it. It's been 20 years. I'm starting to get that way with the sequel trilogy, and I'm even starting to get that way with The Acolyte. It's even though it's only been like not even a year since The Acolyte came out, I think we've beaten the dead horse. I think that's what I think that's what happened with the prequel trilogy. I think it just got beaten to a dead horse to the point where people just stopped. The people as they grew up, like my generation grew up, it got to the point where we're like, all I'm seeing is negativity, I'm going to start sharing what I like because I'm old enough to have a voice in the community now, and especially in the online space. I think that's going to start happening over the course of the next, like, honestly, with the sequel trilogy, it's probably going to start happening in the next 5 to 7 years. Just you wait. It's going to start with The Force Awakens, and it's going to grow from there. Because I see so much, just anytime Star Wars posts something on social media, anytime someone's talking something Star Wars, there's always got to be at least one guy that's like, yeah, and remember how bad the sequel trilogy was? Oh, I hate The Last Jedi. Oh, at least it's better than The Acolyte. Bro, no one asked. Not a single soul. And I think that my prediction is that we're going to see that surge in positivity for this media. And I'm not saying the sequel trilogy is the best Star Wars media. I'm not saying the prequel trilogy is the best Star Wars media, because guess what? Realistically, neither of them are. You know, everyone's got their opinions, but, you know, if there was an objective look at it, neither the sequel trilogy or the prequel trilogy would be at spot number 1. It is just very interesting to see how the cycle continues, and it makes me upset to see that the cycle has continued. So, you know, I try to stay away from conversation like that. If there's like drama going on online, I stay out of it. I'll share my thoughts on, you know, if I see something that I want to, you know, drop my thoughts on. Like today, this is a lot of like just me dumping my thoughts on you guys. But yeah, ultimately, I think that as prequel fans, it's been interesting to grow up, you know, with finding out that people hate the media that you love and revere so much. And then it gains a lot of popularity. It gains a lot of, like, you know, positive discourse within the fandom. And then a lot of those same people that were getting, you know, that had to go through that are now turning around and doing it to the next generation. So maybe we just need to check ourselves as Star Wars fans here. I guess that's my soapbox that I'm on right now. Let me know if you disagree. Let me know if you think I'm stupid, if I'm being woke. If you think I'm woke, then let me know in the comments below, and you can let me know how stupid I am. We can talk about it. If you agreed with me, let me know. You know, like I said, I don't like all of Star Wars, but I'd rather focus on the stuff I do enjoy than the stuff I don't. So I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast episode. Very ranty, very all over the place. But I think I kind of needed that right now. This whole week for me has been kind of all over the place. Thank you guys so much for watching. Again, make sure to check out all the links in the description below. I appreciate the support as always. And there's some cool stuff coming up for the channel. We got some more vlogs, some more reviews coming out. So keep a lookout, guys. And with that, this has been episode 23 of the Blitzcast. We'll catch you for the next one. And may the Force be with you.
Breaking off. All units, fire at will. 1-2, pick your targets. Too many, Captain. Watch your stabilizer, Gold 6. Anybody cover me. I got 2 vultures on my tail. Gotta hold them here. Watch your left. I can't shake them. I'm hit.